Sports Show with Woody and Les and everyone else. Let's go right to the phone and talk to Chris Dempsey, who writes about the NBA for the Denver Post. And let's talk about the fact the Nuggets just named a new head coach. It's Mike Malone, formerly of the Sacramento Kings. Chris, how surprised are you that Malone is the new head coach of the Nuggets?
Mildly surprised. Not completely shocked or anything. I think going into this whole thing, we knew certainly that Josh Kroenke had had affection for Mike Malone and the job that he was able to do in the basketball mind that he was. Obviously, a lot of names were in the mix, but I think from that, in that respect, the fact that he's the coach shouldn't be a shock. Now, from a stylistic standpoint, and knowing what they said they were looking for out of their basketball team, then you are kind of mildly surprised because we've seen, what Mike Malone team is now. We haven't seen what it is with this kind of a roster, with this kind of athleticism on his roster. So maybe some of that changes when he's the coach for the Nuggets. But so it's maybe a little bit of both, but certainly not super shocked that he's the guy. Mildly surprised, more stylistically than anything else.
Chris, is this a Josh Kroenke hire? Who do you think had the say? Who do you think had the most say, the most input in this hire?
Yeah, I think Josh and Tim. I think I think this hire, to me, says that they were in a lot more control of the situation than maybe a lot of us thought they were to begin with. So, Josh has been a Mike Malone guy. Really has liked him a lot, liked him from afar. They were able to interview the guys they wanted to interview, talk about candidates they wanted to talk about. Obviously, Mike Malone twice in terms of the interview process, and they kind of put their heads together and came up with him as the right fit for what they want to be right now and going forward. I think this says that Josh was in a lot of control of this situation.
Chris, this is Woody, your friend.
Hi, Woody.
I think it's the most asinine thing I've heard that you bring in, not you, that you bring in the general manager of the Sacramento Kings and the coach of the Sacramento Kings, who both got fired. One fired the other guy. You got one of the worst teams, even arguably worse than Nuggets, and that's who you're going forward with. And you got Tim Connolly still there. You got Pete wandering the offices between the Avalanche and the Nuggets. And you got a guy that, he's great defensively, make him the assistant coach. And you have been very supportive of Melvin Hunt.
Yeah.
What happens to Melvin Hunt in all this? Does he go to Sacramento and become assistant coach for George Karl?
Hey, he still has a year left on his deal.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens. I wouldn't rule that out, to be honest with you. We've already seen Chadisky go from Philadelphia to Sacramento to be with George Karl, so he might be putting the band back together again. I think ultimately Melvin Hunt will be an assistant somewhere else. He's got a good name around this league. Most likely won't be with the Nuggets. I'm still trying to get confirmation on that, but I don't think he'll be around here much anymore. Although interestingly enough, his kids were here at the Nuggets workout today when they worked out a few guys, a few college pre-draft guys. But it's Woody, the way you put it is very interesting. In terms of D'Alessandro and Mike Malone both coming from Sacramento, being here.
Wouldn't you normally, Chris? I mean, when you go, okay, let's go get a couple of the Warriors assistant coaches.
Or San Antonio.
Let's go, San Antonio guy. So instead, they go get two guys from Sacramento. Les is here trying to make a deal with the Sacramento beat writer to bring in Sacramento players for Ty Lawson. Well, why don't we just trade the whole organization and bring it here, and then you got a lousier organization than you have now.
But you get George Karl back.
Thing is, that might be the only pleasant aspect of the whole thing is to bring George back.
I totally get your point, and I think that's something that they're going to have to explain when they get to to the press conference portion of this. is just what their thinking was behind this. Because
There is no thinking behind it. There was no thought that went into this. It was asinine. I'm going to keep using that.
Chris,
Half asinine.
There is talk. There's been a lot of talk, actually, and you might have heard some of it, that the Nuggets brass wants to bring back Jeff Bzdelik, the former Nuggets head coach and the former CU head coach, to be an assistant coach for this team.
You're kidding.
No.
Now you're kidding.
Are you
Now
hearing?
I'm living a nightmare
Are you
that I
hearing
can't-
the same thing? Do they want Jeff Bzdelik back on the bench alongside
my
Mike Malone?
God.
yeah, here's what I heard. I heard that if Melvin Hunt was going to be the head coach, that they were going to require him to have Jeff Bzdelik there as his associate head coach. Now, beyond that, I don't know.
I heard that with D'Antoni too. If they hired D'Antoni.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, beyond. I only heard it was Melvin Hunt. And beyond that, I haven't heard that with anybody else. I understood why. Well, with Melvin Hunt, because I think that they felt, that the assistant coaches staff probably got away from Brian Shaw a little bit, and they weren't going to allow that to happen under another kind of rookie head coach. Mike Malone, I don't know that they would be as heavy-handed with who they think his assistant should be, just because he's already been a head coach, and maybe he has that already figured out. But we'll see about that as well. I mean, I think that's one of the interesting questions that that'll get answered here shortly.
And Alan Bristow can agree to
Woody's Woody is very depressed, Chris. I just want you to know that.
and then there's
not a good.
And there are a couple
not the
of
highest
people.
one, and-
Yeah, they have a couple of people who do the pre and post game shows. They can bring them back too, and the biggest stuff.
I will say this, Woody and Les. I got a couple of emails kind of immediately after the Mike Malone news started filtering out from a couple of guys around the NBA who both said, "Hey, look, it's not going to be. People aren't going to necessarily like it right off the bat, but." They thought it was a really, really good hire by the Nuggets. So I think there's part of this that remains to be seen. I will say this in defense of Mike Malone. He was doing a good job this season prior to DeMarcus Cousins going down, and then they lost a lot of games without their best player, obviously. And then he got fired in that period of time when DeMarcus Cousins was still out. And I always thought that was bad form on Sacramento's part. If you're going to wait, until the losing started, after the best player goes down, to fire a guy who had actually gotten your team off to a really good start. And so we'll see what he can do here in Denver. I mean, defensively, we know he can coach. And that's just everywhere he's ever been. Defensively, that team has improved. And the Nuggets felt that one pretty personally when he was the assistant coach there at Golden State, the team that beat the Nuggets there in 2013 in the first round of the playoffs. So, I think defensively we know exactly what he is. We know he puts a disciplined basketball team on the court. I think what we're all waiting to see is what he does offensively and what the Nuggets look like offensively.
Yeah, and I'll be dead by then. By the way, Chris, I got off to a great start at the high school prom with my date. It lasted about as long as Sacramento's start. Yeah, if you want to bring in somebody from Sacramento, you guys are all wrong. You're bringing in the wrong. Bring in DeMarcus Cousins. That's the guy they need. Let him coach. Let him be the general manager. He's the guy they need, not all these people. They brought in a capologist. They brought in a guy. You said in defense of Malone. I think that's all we're going to hear after he gets here is defense.
Well, yeah,
At altitude, defense.
I think you're right about that because, listen, his record is what his record is, and it's a pretty steep losing record. And so there's going to have to be a lot of, okay, but this is what he stands for, and this is why he fits with the Nuggets. It'll be a very interesting press conference. It's going to be because, there are there's a lot of information that we are all want to know. We kind of want to know where the Nuggets' thought process was, on this, and we know where he thought it was. But yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to hear how they explain and introduce him to the media and to the fans.
Yeah,
Chris, we hope
they're
that
not excited about having this press conference. I know that. The two of you didn't talk about. We'll pass it along to the next time. But they brought in some more local YMCA players to
we'll talk about
work
that a little
out
later
today.
in the show.
Yeah.
But we need to bring Chris back a couple of times before the June 25th draft to talk about the Mike Malone hire, because he will have held a news conference by then, and the draft coming up on the 25th. You good with that, Chris? We'll bring you back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Is the press conference going to be held here or in Sacramento?
Chris, we'll talk to you soon, man.
Oh, okay, guys. See ya.
Chris Dempsey of the Denver Post, and that segment sponsored by John Elway Chevrolet, Colorado's number one.
When you go to buy a car, what do you really want? You probably want a lot of cars to choose from. And you want the dealership's best price. Not some starting price or target price, the best price. And you want it immediately, not after hours of negotiating. And you want a salesperson who doesn't get paid more if you spend more. Because, well, you don't want to spend more. Well, you're in luck. John Elway wants all of those things too. Better yet, John Elway wants you to have all of those things too. Come see us or click on johnelwaychevrolet.com.